WTF? You're on the series What the Future? What the Future aims to dive deep into hot topics that you, the youth, may be scratching your heads about.
Basically, we ask tough questions so you don't have to.
What the?
Hi everyone, Germaine and Avery here with you, and welcome back to another episode of WTF.
What the Future?
What the Future is a podcast series brought to you by the National Youth Council's Asia Ready Exposure Program, brought to you in partnership with the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. Today's topic is something that I think the two of us have spoken about before.
Yes.
Sustainability.
Sustainability is the buzzword, right? I think in recent years, a lot of people have been saying, you need to be more sustainable, climate change, save the world, global warming. If not, well, the world's going to end.
So what is your personal view on sustainability, Gee?
Well, I think sustainability is something that a lot of people perceive to be, I have to change my whole life,
Yes.
I have to go from 0 to 100. But that's not really the case, in my opinion. I think if everyone takes a small step towards sustainability, that makes an impact as well, right?
Yeah, I think every small thing that you do really plays a big part in that as well. Myself personally, you know that I do this beach cleanups. I take my time to do that. Sometimes when I find the time and the discipline to do it. But I feel like it's all these small little steps, your own sustainability habits in your daily life that actually make a bit of a difference.
Yeah, like something as simple as not using a single-use cutlery and bringing your own, perhaps reusable cutlery that we always do in the office.
Yes.
Actually, we have our own sets. Or even disposable straws, recycling. All these are acts of sustainability. But we can't claim to be experts on sustainability.
Far from it.
How it affects the youth, how it affects Singaporeans. But thankfully, we have two experts in the studio with us today. Our first guest speaker is Mr. Gee Yong, Director of Policy and Planning at the Energy Market Authority, the EMA. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Law.
Hey, thanks.
Yes. So tell us a bit more about the EMA.
So the EMA is both the regulator and industry developer for the energy sector. So in essence, we are the MATA. We look after the energy companies in Singapore. We make sure they play ball, follow the rules. But at the same time, we work with the industry to really develop the sector to try and push sustainability and other measures, security, etc. within Singapore.
So you're a regulatory authority.
Yes, but also an industry development as well. So we both partners as well as the policemen.
So who do you police? The big companies, basically.
We mainly deal with the big energy companies, so the power generation companies, the retailers who sell your electricity packages to consumers. Yeah, so those are the ones that we generally deal with, but we deal with an assortment of companies.
So our second expert joining us here in the studio today is the Director of Global ESG Strategy and Engagement at S&P Global, Ms. Cheryl Chen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Germaine and Avery.
Tell us a bit more about the strategies that S&P Global are working on at the moment.
Firstly, about S&P Global, we are a financial data analytics company. We have a credit ratings division. We also run the S&P 500 and other market indices, and we provide financial and market data to the investors and financial market participants. So for us, we do have a net zero commitment. We publish our annual sustainability report for more than 10 years now, and we try to work with a wide variety of internal stakeholders to walk the talk on ESG.
Oh, okay.
So I think before we go into a topic, right, what I would like to ask is when we talk about energy, we hear a lot of, very similar words. Like you said, net zero, we hear clean energy, we hear sustainability. If we talk about energy as a whole here in Singapore and to the youth, what would be your take on it?
Energy powers everything around us, right? Our homes, our offices, our schools, our iPads, computers. And when I'm first learning about sustainability, there's always this food, energy, water nexus, which is really interesting. It really explains why the current high energy prices leads to increased price of food, because you need energy, you run your farm, you need to transport food, and that leads to increased food prices if your energy price increase. And water as well. Water is needed for food, energy is needed to treat water, and there's all these intricacies between water, food, and energy, right? So this is the reason why the current high energy prices is causing disruptions, because it has all these linkages to the other parts of essentials and goods and services.
Absolutely. What about you, Gee Yong? What do you think about energy in Singapore?
I think it's important. If you imagine our entire lifestyle today, modern lifestyle is built on fossil fuels. Everything that we do, everything we have is built on energy. And now we're transiting away from fossil fuels to something that is cleaner, hopefully more sustainable, and affects our day-to-day life really, as what Cheryl's mentioned. My household of 4 people, we have 3 laptops, two iPads, a handphone for me and my wife. So our entire lifestyle revolves around technology, and technology relies around energy. So this is really how can we maintain the current lifestyle yet having a much more sustainable way of achieving this is important for us.
Yeah, I think everyone's talking about energy these days, right? And I think it's good to have a better understanding of it, especially for the youth, because it affects their future as well. I mean, we're a bit older than that. So a bit slightly older than that.
Still youth, still
Still
young at
youthful,
heart. Yeah.
still youthful, right? But I think one of the biggest things that happened this past year is actually the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, we've heard that this has some impacts on energy, but we don't exactly know how that affects, energy. Can anyone of you speak on that?
I think to put it in broad terms, right? I mean, Russia is one of the largest exporter of oil and LNG. And when the war happened, there were sanctions, there were import bans, and then supply dropped. And when supply dropped, there isn't sort of ready, alternative sources, right? Or existing sources who are able to ramp up production so quickly. So prices spike. And Europe is heavily reliant on, fossil fuels from Russia. Some of them have imposed import bans as well. So with that, it really caused this supply and demand sort of mismatch, and then prices will start to spike. And there are positive and negatives. On the negative side of the house, people start to have a wake-up call, right? We are over-reliant, to Gee Yong's point, on fossil fuels still, when we are supposed to transit to a low-carbon economy. We are over-reliant on certain large exporters. And all these really rings the bell that we need to diversify both the energy mix to cleaner energy sources and also the source mix, right?
Yeah, so speaking on things like, positives and negative, we know that the energy crisis has been happening because of this war in Ukraine. Do you think, Gee Yong, that it's helped or hindered the global energy transition into, renewable energy? Has it really hindered it, or do you think it's helped it a little bit?
It has both positives and negatives. So the negative is that there's some backsliding. People have resorted back into using more fossil fuels because energy security is ultimately extremely important as well. You don't want to move towards a more cleaner transition, but you have people freezing in their homes, right, during winter, or have not enough electricity. So that's important. However, this is also triggered in additional investments, both from the public and the private sector, governments as well as companies, to really push and invest in new technologies, advance the development of technologies that may potentially help us to speed up the transition, and also to actually build and deploy more of these technologies. Talking a little bit about Singapore, so we do not import gas from Russia. So you would think, so then we're covered, right? No problem for us. But the truth is that the gas market in the world is a global market. People are buying from different sources. And when Europe has less gas from Russia, they buy from different sources. And they're competing with Singapore for these same sources of gas. And this is pushing up prices. And therefore, you can see the impact on energy prices in Singapore, even though we're not directly importing any electricity or any gas from Russia.
Where do we then, Singapore, stand in this transition, right? I mean, we're so small, you wouldn't think we would have an impact or a footprint on the global energy crisis. But where do we stand?
It's true. I think Singapore, we only produce maybe 0.011% of our carbon emissions, if I remember the number correctly.
0.11%, right?
Yes,
0.11%.
exactly. It's a really, really small number. I mean,
Okay.
And Singapore's a small red dot, right? So as an actual contributor of emissions, we are very low, right? But we are seen as almost a bellwether for developing as well as developed countries. So if Singapore can do it, then other countries will take the lead. And if we can't do it, then they'll say that if Singapore can't do it, then how can any other country, developing countries, even stand a chance? So Singapore has this role as a global leader. We're doing a lot. We're trying our best to do as much as we can within our natural constraints. Because Singapore, we don't have any natural resources.
Yeah.
We import almost all of energy, 95% of natural gas into Singapore. So we're really relying on fossil fuels, and it's a difficult transition for Singapore. And so if Singapore is able to do it, then this shows that actually it's really doable around the world, where many countries have much more natural resources they can tap on.
A lot of people talk about net zero emissions, right? And Singapore has actually announced that we aim to achieve net zero emissions by the year 2050. So if you're saying that our carbon emission is 0.11%, net zero, does that mean 0%?
So the aim is for net zero is that basically Singapore on aggregate produces zero emissions. It doesn't mean that we don't produce any emissions, but there's some negative as well. So you can extract, if you're able to extract carbon emissions from the environment as well, that's a negative. And so plus minus, you add off, and then we get net zero emissions from Singapore.
But we're so land scarce. How are we going to take back the emissions? How are we going to have the infrastructure?
There are sort of creative solutions. Last year, the Tengah largest floating solar PV farm was launched, right?
Oh, I actually saw that at
Yeah.
Tengah.
That was like 120,000 solar panels, like 45 like football field sized. And that can power, I think, 16,000 in HDB homes in a year. And it's floating solar farms on the Tengah Reservoir. These innovative solutions and ideas really, kind of help us transcend our constraints and challenges, right?
I've got a question about solar panels. How much energy can a solar panel actually produce?
Oh. You put him on the spot.
Is there like an actual number to calculate it?
Or like an
Or like an
estimate,
equation,
right?
yeah.
Okay. There is. I don't have the actual number, but essentially, a solar panel produces about 4 hours worth of energy on total over a day. And in terms of the land footprint, solar is about 600 times less dense than a turbine, which is why we have this problem that ultimately, as much as solar is the most sustainable and most viable renewable resource in Singapore, we can't run totally on solar because it only powers us during the day, and also because it requires a lot of land, and ultimately Singapore is land scarce and we are not able to put enough solar panels to power the entire of Singapore.
So what other sources then? Because if you think about, apart from solar energy, the rest that I know, maybe nuclear energy. Wind, yeah. Well, but we can't have nuclear energy here in Singapore, can we?
Yeah. So the EMA, we laid out what we call the energy story for Singapore, and that really talked about the 4 switches that we think will be able to power Singapore over the long run. So the first one is natural gas, which we talked about. It is a fossil fuel, but it's the cleanest fossil fuel there is today. And today we run on 95%. Over time, we will want to reduce our reliance on natural gas, but it's going to be a transition. So we're likely to continue to rely on this for next 10, 20 years or so. So it's important that we continue to have secure energy that will continue to maintain our lifestyles and power our companies in Singapore. The second switch is solar. We talked about it. It's our most viable renewable resource. But ultimately, there's a limit. We estimate that even by 2050, we can get at most 10%, if not less than that, of Singapore's total needs through solar. So that's really only a small fraction of what we really consume on a day-to-day basis. The third one that we're working actively on is what we call regional power grids. So actually drawing energy not just from Singapore, but around the region. We buy water from Malaysia, so possibly we buy electricity, we buy natural gas from them as well, right? And this will potentially provide up to 30% of our total needs. The fourth one is what we call low carbon alternatives. And this is what Cheryl talked about. We are taking a step of faith into the future in terms of what are possible. And we're relying on technologies that will continue to somewhat nascent today, but hopefully will mature as time goes along and we'll be able to deploy them in Singapore. The big one, which is we talked about, is
announced, right? The
exactly.
national
So we have a
hydrogen,
national hydrogen strategy. We are pushing towards this technology today. It's available, but it's extremely expensive. So if you use natural hydrogen today, we could probably pay 3-4 times the prices that we pay today. Right? So it's really expensive today. But as a momentum, a lot of countries are seeing this as a possible way for them to decarbonize their power sectors.
How has Singapore approached this over the last few years, this regional collaboration?
I think we have really seen a strong, uptick, right, in terms of awareness that there is untapped opportunities, right? Sustainability, obviously the climate change and energy transition, it's a huge risk, but it's also a huge business and green market opportunity, right? And I think in the last 3 years, we do see our neighboring countries, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, they are realizing that they can tap into the green energy market as well. They have the land, they have the natural conditions, which are, they can deploy solar farms, they can potentially tap on hydro, or there's a lot of hydro dams in Laos, for example. They can tap on wind energy. And collaboration is really bringing our value to the table, right? There are some countries that has the land and the natural resources, but maybe not so strong in terms of capital and funding. And then there are some countries that have capital and funding, but maybe we don't have the land or, the natural resources. And it's really coming together, right? Bringing our expertise, our experience, the markets and the systems. And it's really about, to Gee Yong's point, how can we make the pie bigger for everybody?
I think I bring it back to the youth again. As they grow older, right? We are kind of old already, but as they grow older, right, they are looking for job opportunities. And from what I know, there's an aim to create 50,000 green jobs in Singapore by 2030, right? So how is this kind of something the youth can look forward to? And what are these green jobs exactly?
I think Cheryl touched about it right at the beginning that really sustainability is something that's growing as a skill set that's not just within sustainability sector, for example, but it cuts across many sectors. So there's a lot of work on energy efficiency that can cut across any kind of industry. We have specialized in terms of technologies that we are deploying on the energy side, for example, like hydrogen, etc. You can build skill sets in that area. Carbon credits, carbon trading, the finance sector. It's a growing area that we are looking into how we can grow the Singapore economy in that front as well. And there are jobs on that front as well. So there's really a wide spectrum of jobs that are available. What is of course missing is there's a lack of skill sets within the manpower today. So even from on the electric sector, you may be very used to doing wiring in your houses, but do you know how to wire a solar panel? Not everybody is well experienced with this, and we need to ramp up the skills so that everybody's able to be familiar with such new technologies.
Would you consider these skills green skills? Is that what it's categorized under? Like being able to fix a solar panel and stuff like that. Are those considered green skills?
I have colleagues in my EME who are working on developing what the new frameworks are for green jobs, etc. So there's a range of different skills that are required, and it range both from technical to more your marketing to other kind of skill sets as well. So those will be included as some of the skills, but I think that is only a fraction of the different skill sets that we're looking at. I think there's a range of different things that we can look into.
There's so many different roles, right? If you think about in any other industry, it's just that these roles are in the green industry. So because of that, they are considered green skills because you need a certain level of knowledge and understanding of the green sector in order to even do, let's say, something like marketing for the green sector. You need to know what it is, what your problems are, who your audiences is. So for the youth, if you're looking for jobs, perhaps in the green sector, I think that will be the hot sector for the next decade or so. I mean, you can check it out, right? See what's online, check with your schools or higher institutes of learning to see what kind of opportunities there may be for you, or even check out the Asia Ready Exposure Program.
To add on to Germaine's point, it's not just green jobs per se, like a narrow focus lens, right? But really a wide angle lens to make sustainability sustainable. I think we need to decentralize it. We need to integrate it into as many things everywhere all the time. And we have all these different jobs. I liaise with colleagues in finance. They are helping us to price climate risk. I'm working with colleagues in procurement. They are helping us to look at our scope 3 emissions in our supply chain and sustainable procurement. I'm, liaising with colleagues in our global real estate on how we choose between which green building to, consolidate our staff in. So all these roles wasn't as big a role, say, 3 to 5 years back. But now you are seeing more and more of these, sustainable finance. You're seeing more and more of these sustainability integrated roles, but not in the corporate sustainability team, but they are in operations, they are in procurement, they are in, research, they are in tech, in, marketing, in social media. So there are all these different, I would say, interesting synergies between different domains and sustainability.
If the youth maybe are in a school or in a company, in an internship, and it's not a green transitioning company, right? But they themselves want to be like, I want to do something in my daily life that can help this green transition, to help sustainability. What would be a few of these things that you would tell the youth, start here, start small, and it will make a difference, even if you don't think it is?
I think to Germaine's point is really, walking the talk, right? And I think many a times it's not a knowledge gap. We already know what to do, right? Use a reusable bag, use a water bottle, set your aircon to 24 degrees Celsius, eat less meat, consume less, buy less, take public transport. And the goal is really not to be perfect. like do all of the above or nothing. It's really to do what you can and to advocate others to follow the same, right? Inspire your family members, parents, akong ama, to do the same as well.
Any other, kind of like last words that you would love to tell a youth out there about, being sustainable or maybe growing into a sustainable career?
I would say the opportunities are unprecedented in the space, right? And sustainability and sustainable development is both, I would say, the biggest risk, biggest threat, but also the biggest opportunity of our generation, right? And it is to find ways to have your niche in sustainability is such a broad area. You don't have to be in a green job per se, but where you are, who you are, what you're doing, you can integrate sustainability and make sustainable choices, even in your work life or in your day-to-day life.
I think for a lot of youth, they may think that it's something really difficult and they're too young and they can't, maybe you have to rely on the adults, etc., to do some of this. But I've been to some of the universities or even junior colleges, etc., and the people some of them are really well educated, really know their stuff. So if you want to, you really can actually learn the things, understand them well, and then change your lifestyle, change the way you work, change the companies that you work in, and hopefully that will drive kind of real sustainable change in the world.
I think for me, it's a situation of kind of a give and take. Like you said, it's practically impossible to say, I am sustainable at a 100% rate. We try our best to take public transport, we try our best to, put the aircon at 24 degrees and stuff like that. All these
Actually, to me, I think it's so much more than that, right? I mean, that's a first step for sure. But after, hearing from Cheryl and Gee Yong, I feel like sustainability, like she said, it's unprecedented times. This is the time to take action. It's now or never, essentially. But I just want to give a big thanks to Cheryl as well as Gee Yong for coming here, spending your time here, and sharing with us from your own field of work and from your own expertise what sustainability really is.
Yeah, I think it was very insightful. Now I think Germaine knows how to properly recycle.
Hey! Now, next week, we're actually going to be touching on global geopolitics.
Ooh, sounds very, very chim already.
It is very chim. I can't even tell you what it is right now, but thankfully we have expert joining us and they have spent their careers understanding how power relations and economic interests amongst countries can affect our everyday lives.
Yes, but thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of WTF
What the Future?
Make sure that you go on over to NYC's Facebook and Instagram, leave your comments and let us know whether or not you think Germaine knows how to recycle now.
I know how to recycle.
I don't
and
think
you
so.
can't recycle receipts. Yeah, I know that. You can also learn about what's happening in the region and sign up for related events by visiting the Asia Ready resource page. It's youthtopia.sg. It's a first-stop portal for the latest news, topics, and resources that matter to the youths.
We'll catch you next week.
Bye.